Hello all, Alison here, and I'm delighted to be joining you for this Fodder School 3 hop. I think you can probably tell from these projects that it's been an extraordinary journey for me this year, and I think for all of us in Fodder School. The accumulation of projects, but also of astonishing amounts of fodder that I still have available and ready to play with as my creative journey continues. It's a real joy. It's been a real privilege to see everybody playing, growing, learning, creating this year. And I thought the simplest thing with what I've been doing is to share with you month by month what I've created. It's 10 out of the 12 projects. So I think I've done pretty well, and someday I'll get to catch up with the other two. So let's start at the very beginning. It's a very fine place to start. So starting at the beginning of the fodder year with Di's wonderful bookbinding class, this is the fabric covered book that I created using some of my paper artsy stamps, as you can see, but yeah, painting on the fabric was a new venture and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I made it with beautiful thick watercoloured paper, and I had a lovely time playing on the textured papers inside. I've been saving up this watercolour paper, which is a beautiful cold press, very heavy weight paper, for something special, and I thought that probably the first Fodder School project of the year was a special enough project for that to be used, and I'm still looking forward to going on and filling up more of these pages. So that was October, and then of course we moved on to November and Tiffany's lovely class. I made a couple of these because I made my first batch of wallets, and in, you know, sort of my frosty wintry blues and greens, my palette very much shifts with the seasons, so that October one definitely in autumnal colours. Then I was starting to shift into a sort of misty morning place, but then I also created a bonus project for that month, and these were the second batch of wallets I made. I made them exactly the same process as Tiffany's, but because I used lots of neutral colours, they ended up with a much more consistent sort of overall look. And obviously I added my traditional spatter, which I can't resist. And yeah, these were by then the very autumnal, wintry kinds of bits of fodder I was creating. And of course in those folders there's still lots of those watercolour possibilities ready to be used, and I couldn't resist heading slightly towards berries, which I know was jumping the gun because we weren't going to get to my class for a long time, but yeah, that's that berry obsession for you. But developing this kind of relationship with how the classes were offered and how that tallied with what goes on in my own creative brain was throughout Fodder School was a really fascinating journey for me, because I'll fess up, creating fodder is not my natural way of creating. I tend to work in one-offs, so at the very end of this you'll see the piles and piles of fodder I have around ready and waiting to be used, and I think it'll be a continuing journey for me to find out how that interacts with my own methodologies as a creator. So that was November, and then in December we went into collaging with Barb Smucker and created so many different ways of mark making and printing and all kinds of glories, and her end product were dimensional collages. I had these MDF squares, so I did do some of that, but they weren't quite as thick as hers. And the brainwave I had was I have many cheese boxes conserved after eating camembert. Lots of them go a long way back. 2019 that one's from, that's been waiting. 2020 a couple of those. So in order to get that dimensional collage, I thought that I would create circular collages with some of my beautiful mark made papers from Barb. So that's October, November, December. Let's move on through the year. So in January we had a wonderful time making inspiration card decks with Megan, and this was a mode of creation that I sort of felt very at home with. I love making backgrounds with inks and sprays and all of that kind of business, stenciling. It was a joy to fish out of my stash stamps and stencils and all kinds of things that really haven't had enough of a playtime over the years. I was really delighted to be able to combine words and pictures. That's my handle online, and so yeah, lots of my quote stamps from Paper Artsy came into these, but also stencils from various sources. I can leave links to individual blog posts which have got more detail about all of that kind of thing. But it was a joy to me to create an inspiration deck that had such sort of personal meaning, but also all these collected stamps and stencils that I've had for years and really haven't played with enough to get those to have a chance to come out and play. I did a bonus session for this one as well, where I talked about stamp flipping and how you could get echoing stamps, because this deck is all about where I sit a lot with my creativity, which is about visual poetry and this kind of sense of repetition and variation. And I think that's something that tallies really a lot with the Fodder School ethos, is the conclusion I've come to, this kind of sense of repetition and variation. So similar images, similar colours, similar ways of working, but repeated in different positions or with slightly different colour tones, slightly different ideas. And the sort of intersection of those two things through the whole year has been a real delight to me. And I suppose if I was going to pick one other word that has occurred to me a number of times over this fodder year, it would be accumulation, because the way one accumulates supplies anyway as a creative maker, but then the way fodder allows you to accumulate so many pieces of art that are ready-made or are ready to play with, and the accumulation of projects over the year was the other thing. So then February, amazing classes, doing these embellished papers with Jennifer, and yeah, at the beginning of the month I embarked with sort of right out there colours as she was doing, but then of course as I chose my papers for my finished project, I did dive into my springtime palette started to emerge, so that rather than picking out the reds and the oranges to work with, I did start to just indulge myself with the blues and the greens. But I had a glorious time with these pops of bright yellow. That's a way to cheer up February. And that was all about the crocuses in the garden and some very early daffodils that just kind of went, oh, hello, look, we do bright yellow, even in February. So yeah, creating that accordion album and playing with those shapes and creating, again, favourite things, natural things, but also the tiny houses. And this was a month where I had a real sort of light bulb moment of understanding that I'm not really into pattern. Excuse me. And given that pattern was sort of the whole ethos of what was underlying the mark making in Jennifer's class, I did slightly go into panic. But then I discovered that if I reverted to my sense of the organic and the botanical and worked with organic and botanical patterns rather than thinking geometry, then I started to have a really glorious time with pattern. So it was another of those sort of light bulb moments that Fodder School has given me, of looking at a thing that seems a long way away from me, but finding out how that intersects with the things that give me joy, and learning how I could allow those things to combine and create a thing that I would never have done by myself, but that in the end gave me really a lot of pleasure. But it was a fabulous learning curve, and I adore learning curves. It's my favourite thing in the world, is to be on a steep learning curve. So that was an amazing month. March is not going to fit on the floor here, I don't think. So I'm going to kind of pick it up and show you it under the camera here. But then what I'm also going to do before we move on to the next 3 months is show you where it actually lives in my craft studio. So bear with me while I pick up this crate and try to fit it on camera. So Shay's class in March was all about life gathering and life curating and looking at our creative joys, our life joys, our accumulations, and here's that word accumulation again. So Shay was working on a corkboard, but throughout my craft studio things are stored in supermarket fruit crates that I pick up for free, and I use them all around my craft studio. And the little shallow crate that I used for this had been sitting around for a while and kind of going, oh, I can keep things in you. And in fact, at the end of this video, you'll see fruit crate is exactly where I keep all my overflowing fodder as well. So yeah, I collect vintage glass bottles, and it was a joy to be able to have those. Shakespeare is a thread through my life, words and pictures. If you've listened to my podcast with Wendy, you'll hear more about that. And also in the Love Fest, my August Love Fest, lots and lots about that if you want to know. Working with film, working with theatre, Shakespeare quotes, metal, watercolours, texture, all of those things. And of course, what I make above all as an artist are tags. So I was delighted to also find a way that you'll see it more when we're up on the wall, but dangling below, I found a way to attach a bunch of tags. So that was January, February and March and the accumulation. I'm going to pop this back up on the wall and do a little shot of where it lives in the studio before we move on to the next part of the year. And here it is up on the wall in the craft studio. So it lives between one of the windows and above one of the making areas, and I can swap in and out these tags if I want to. So far I haven't been moved to, because these three seem to fit with all the ideas going on up above. So yeah, that's the supermarket fruit crate, shallow supermarket fruit crate from March, working with Shay. And yes, there's another of these, as I say, full of so many background papers that were created during this month, as well as many other months. So let's get back to going through the year. So in April, we worked with another beautiful accumulating, gathering, collating, collaging process with Chris. And oh my goodness, I had a lovely time with these as well. They include fabric dyeing, which I did with red cabbage, which is very local to where I live. I'm based in the Czech Republic in South Bohemia, and we eat a lot of red cabbage here. I had no idea that a red cabbage could, just the cabbage could create such an amazing array of shades. If you look back through my Instagram, you'll see some of those fabrics that were just astonishing. And again, I created a bonus for this one of just watercolouring my clay, paper clay lavender. These were all created on book boards, as you know, and it's a thing I do very often. So to me, it was a sort of automatic to do what I've done with book boards before and create these brads. No, they're not called brads, are they? The rusty wire going through, punches. My brain is really not working. You can probably hear from my slightly croaky voice that I'm getting over a cold at the moment. But that's the timing of things. Again, I've got so many beautiful papers and things from this session still ready to play. But that was a lovely month. Again, creating those boards. These also have a home now in the craft studio on some of my shelves where I keep inspirational works out and ready to play with. So yeah, what else did we do that month? There was so many different papers. Oh, the rust dyeing rust, rusting things, rusting objects, which again is something I do a lot of, so I had a wonderful time with that. But then all these nature textures, it's an absolutely central part of my creative process, nature and her influence on me. And you've seen it already in terms of how the colour palette shifts through the year, that it would be absolutely impossible for me to use these autumn colours in April or May or June. I simply can't go there. And when it is October, August or September, it's compulsory or compulsive, either way you want to go. That was heading into, yeah, the colours are dictated to me by the environment. And so that lovely sense of rainy April, still with the landscape here. Spring comes very late here, but we do get lovely sunshine way into October and often November. But so in April, the landscape is still very much about bark and branches, and the trees are only just starting to bud. But then in the garden, you are starting to get these little moments of colour. Again, crocuses, grape hyacinth. And so those purples definitely were part of that journey for me at that point. So yes, let's accumulate those and let them sit. That was April. And then in May, we had an amazing time with Susanne, sketching botanicals, creating amazing collaging. For the first time in my life, I actually got a sewing machine to cooperate with me in order to create my fodder portfolio. So in here, as well as botanical sketches from that month with Susanne, there are bits of fodder from earlier ones. So creating the panels was one of the things we did in this April class, and that was the sort of first stage of what Susanne was sharing with us. But then to go on and create this extraordinary wallet to keep things in was amazing. And you'll see that I've also got some of my papers from Shay. I've got some of my papers from Chris's class. They're just oodles of it. There is a longer video, which again I can link below if you want to examine this fodder portfolio in more detail, because really I can't show you everything because it's such a phenomenal structure that just keeps open. Oh look, there's some of my red cabbage fabric in there. It has faded slightly because I didn't do any fixatives or anything like that. I'm not trying to create for the eons here, so I tend not to do fixative type things. There's some of my Barb collages from February, and yeah, just having a place where one can look at this. I didn't create a fodder diary because obviously otherwise I'd be showing you that as well. But this fodder portfolio and the sort of ins and outs of being able to look at what one's created over the months, and yeah, to a large extent that's from the February, April, May. There are even some back from the Fodder Challenge, Tiffany's watercolours. This fodder portfolio makes me sort of wish I had created, oh yeah, look, that's from Fodder Challenge. I had created a diary, but you know, at some point when life permits, I will gather some of these thoughts. And in fact, this video here is proving to be a place where I'm keeping useful thoughts about what the whole process was, what the learning was, what the ideas were that gathered through the year. So that was May. Now June, I have a confession. Excuse me, this is the end of the cold still causing chaos. Life just got away from me and I wasn't able to join in with swapping and so on and so forth in June. I just couldn't get my act together for it. So I still have my garden ATCs from Sarah's amazing class in June. And yeah, this was another joy. And again, a sort of light bulb moment. Anybody who follows me on Instagram as Words and Pictures may or may not have noticed that I have another Instagram account, which is Bohemian Home, which sort of shares pictures of the nature, the countryside around here, but also my garden. And there are all these photos that I've taken, thousands upon thousands of them, but have never printed out. And so creating these tiny photos that do pay homage to the garden, and obviously those photos, as we all know, guided all the amazing mark making and textured papers and incredible ideas and techniques and possibilities that Sarah shared. So ending up with this set of ATCs, and now I sort of kind of can't bear to part with them. I know ATCs are created for swapping, but there's something about this being the first time I celebrated the work that I've done in the garden, and gardening is another new thing for me. I've really only been gardening for sort of 4 or 5 years, and if you'd told me 10 years ago that I would have got into gardening, I'd have laughed in your face. So there's something about this being the first time that I've got a physical, other than the garden itself, of course, which gives me huge joy, a sort of physical celebration of the garden. It's mine. I don't want to swap them, I'm sorry. One of these days I will create some more ATCs that are deliberately for swapping, but that was another joyous month for June. And then there's one final set of things to add to my accumulation, which of course is my own month in August. I'm just going to prove my point about the supermarket fruit crates, because at the moment my little houses are also living in a slightly deeper supermarket fruit crate. So that's where they are at the moment, partly because while we were still working through Fodder School and I didn't know if I might need to do more photos or more videos or anything like that, but the bonus houses have joined the original Very Berry houses, and of course there are multiple videos of these, you can track them down. But again, it was about words and pictures. I think the original thought might have been that I was going to be one of the wintry months, and so I think that thought was in my head as I was creating these, but I explain in detail in the class about why berries are an obsession. But of course I've made little houses in many forms, and it was a joy to actually be in August and be able to use some of the spring and summer colours, summer meadow flowers from my own stamp sets, but sketches again, the panels straight from Susanne's class, little bits of fodder from Tiffany's fodder challenge class, and again that combination of nature inspired affairs, the whole coming together of collaging, dimensional collaging, having papers ready to use, having scraps and bits and pieces that all somehow just magically combine to create a world of creative joy. So yeah, the journey has been an extraordinary one, and I'm really sad that I haven't been able to do July and September with those projects, but at some point life will allow and I'll be able to catch up with the full fodder year. But I think I haven't done badly. That's 10 out of 12, although of course one of them is mine, so obviously there's that one. But I'm so grateful for this extraordinary year of creativity, and I promised I would show you at least a glimpse of the accumulated fodder. So let me go and grab that for you. So this is basically another supermarket crate full with additional boxes. So there was a tea box where I was collecting the stuff for Chris's month, goes in there. I've got various Amazon envelopes, so the tiny pieces from the embellished papers are in a little wallet there to just keep them together, because I never throw away any piece of paper that's decorated, no matter how small. You never know when you're going to need something tiny. What's in here? I don't even know. Oh look, boxes full. Actually, those are fodder challenge pieces, so those are also tucked in there, ready to play with. There's a box full here of, yep, more botanical sketches, more of the papers from Susanne's month. So again, that's a sort of small box. Hang on, where have my... Oh, I've left my other little box over. Hang on. Here are some of the fabrics dyed with the red cabbage. So the purples, the greens, the browns. I also did batches of paper just to test. So again, that just adding acidity or taking acidity away. So all of that is sitting waiting. It's been such a busy year, I can't tell you. So the accumulation has been extreme and there hasn't been much using. And then, oh look, you've escaped. Let's pop you back in. And then yes, these are papers. If I lift it up, it's really heavy. So again, it's literally a supermarket crate. The great thing about these is they stack, so they can just all sit in one pile. And I've got papers and mark making and stripes and colours and collages and rusted papers and gel printed papers, oodles of just colour rainbows. Those are obviously from my own watercolour background bonus sessions. There are gel prints, there's gel printing on book pages, there's papers and prints, watercolor, salty watercolors, textured papers, lots of those ready to use, which is a joy. Lovely sort of tissuey mop-up papers from Barb's month on tracing paper, those are, which is gorgeous. Got all that to use. Beautiful gel prints. I mean, so much stuff. So much accumulated joy in this crate, stacked up and ready to play with anytime I can find a moment. But that doesn't look sorted, but I know where it all is. I know it's all in one place. I know I can come and find it when I want it. And it's layered up with those little boxes for the separate smaller pieces for the fabric. And for me, that works as a way of keeping all my fodder accumulation together. Let me lift it away and come back to the projects. So that's my sort of little overview of an incredible year of creative adventures and creative joy. And yeah, I have loved seeing everybody just take flight this year in so many different ways. It's been joyous following the process myself, but it's been equally joyous seeing how everyone grows in their creative flow. So thank you to everyone involved, teachers, participants, of course, to Wendy and everyone involved in the organisation of the whole process. It's an astonishing thing, and yeah, I will continue to explore Fodder's possibilities. Thanks everybody.